We are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is public comment. I have not had anyone approach me for public comment, so we will move on to approval of July 3rd, 2025 Extension Education and Economic Development Committee meeting minutes. I have a motion by Supervisor Rosenberg, a second by Vice Chair Pfeffrick. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you. We will move on to 5, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. A, discussion and possible action by EED. 1, discussion regarding 2026 annual budget development and policy recommendations from the committee, including review of the mandatory discretionary program document and discussion of rates and fees. Administrator Leonard.
Okay, I'll start. So again, recurring item on your agenda through the budget process to give those early and often opportunities for committees to provide direction on those 3 policy questions that we frequently talk about, right? What programs or services do we offer within the allowances of state law, of course? At what level do we deliver them? And then finally, at what cost? That relates to fees. So just to give you a little bit of an update, we've given this presentation continue to give this presentation at all the committee meetings. The additional information that we've been really working on, you'll recall from the board's direction through the annual work plan, one of the chief goals we had was to update our compensation plan. So the last time the board did a compensation study was 2022. We used 2022 data, and if you think about what's happened since 2022 in the real estate market, or all of us look to equalize value, right? When we build our county budget and net new construction, well, equalized value since 2022 has gone up 12%, 11%, 9%, and again this year, the preliminary number we just got earlier this month was 9%. So it's not surprising, and I've referenced this before, that our consultant has said your ranges need to move, and that they're about 10% off of our market target. So we've been working as staff to really dial in what does that mean, because not everybody on the range is potentially below that market rate, because we have people right between the ranges, but it's certainly going to be a significant lift. Right now, our best estimates are that amount is 7.65%, which is significant. Of course, we're not going to have 7.65% of new county money. Like I said before, we also got our net new construction preliminary number. That number was 1.61%. So below what I think we were all hoping for, certainly below what the county board budgeted. You budgeted an estimate of 1.75. Of course, we're going to revise that to our actual when we get the final numbers. But staff, my big challenge to department heads is going to be, how do we make this happen? And there's a number of levers to pull on that, and I've referenced these before, but aligning our funding, our positions, I should say, our costs to our funding streams is vitally important, maximizing grants. We had our infrastructure meeting this morning, talking with Highway. How do we make sure that all of our intergovernmental charges, we're building those appropriate rates into those intergovernmental charges back to the state, because the state will pay that. So then again, it's not something that Marathon County necessarily has to pick up in terms of finding the funds to do that. So we're doing that across all of our departments, and as you know, not every dollar in the county budget is created equal. We have a lot of departments that have significant reimbursements, and then we have some departments like the Sheriff's Office, which is largely in administration, largely levy. So we're working through that. We're confident we're going to be able to bring you a budget that allows for the implementation of that plan. We're making a presentation to HR Finance next week, Wednesday, to get the policy direction needed on that. But from my perspective, the number one thing we need to do is build a budget that implements the findings of our wage study. Why does that relate not only to the budget discussion, but broadly to fees, which one of the things you have in your packet is that fee schedule. When we look at compensation, the board put in its budget assumption market to convey, hey, that's going to be that market study that we're doing. You also did that with respect to the fees, the fee revenue section of those budget assumptions. So that 7.65% should guide that fee selection. However, my direction to department heads is going to be, it's not just the compensation that is going up. The HR Finance and Property Committee and the full board you've talked about, and you have budget assumptions around in health insurance. The health insurance market is 8 to 10%. When you look around our good neighbors to the south, Portage County, 22% renewal projection increase. Our friends at the city of Wausau were quoted 18%. We budgeted an assumption of 6.5. We're going to work really hard to get toward that, and hopefully we can do better. But it's not just the 7.65% for compensation that we should build into fees. It's also the other related costs, right? Fringe, the Wisconsin retirement system. We don't have control over that. That went up from 6.95% contribution to 7.20%. All those things bundled together are increased costs that are being passed on to the county. We need to recover those through our fees, or as Chair Robinson has frequently mentioned, effectively we're subsidizing those costs. And that's a choice for the board, not a choice for staff. So my direction for staff is going to be, right now we're going to refine that number. I think it's going to be about 10% when you blend all those things together. But we're going to operate off that market direction that the board gave, and we're going to then bring those fees to you with one caveat. If there are fees that have a market-driven component to them, and the example I use is solid waste. We can't just add, the board has talked about creating a leachate treatment facility, over $10 million. We can't just take the cost of doing that and put that on top of our tipping fee, because we'll price ourselves out of the market, and then all of the haulers will go somewhere else, and we won't have any revenue coming in. So there are some services we deliver where there is a market component. Kim's department's a little bit like that with marriage licenses. You can drive to another county to get a marriage license. What's the likelihood of that? Not all that great. You got to be in the neighborhood, but of price. But then we have other things. Lori's department, you can't get if you get a permit from Conservation Planning and Zoning, you got to get it in Marathon County. You can't go to Lincoln County to get one. So we're the one-stop shop for some things. And then there are other things on the other end of the spectrum that are much more market. We're going to bring you my goal is to bring you a list of those fees, the areas where, hey, maybe 10% you shouldn't increase it because we might price ourselves out. But otherwise, we're going to operate off the direction the board gave with that idea of market relative to fees. So that's the kind of intro to tell you, again, this is what we've been, quite honestly, Sam is doing a lot of that work relative to Sam and certainly Molly on the compensation study and working with our consultant, but that presentation will be to HR Finance next week, Wednesday, with a high level of what does the study show and what does implementation look like. So with that, I think certainly if you have questions about any of the programs, as always, you can ask those. Or if you want to provide direction, hey, we want to do a new thing. Of course, my response is then going to be, okay, you want to do a new thing. What are we going to stop doing? Because we, again, don't have new revenues coming in. But that's my introduction, Madam Chair. I don't know if Committee Chair Robinson, if you have anything to add.
Thank you. The administrator covered most of it. And again, in the context of the budget, we've got a $200 million budget. You know, under $60 million comes off the levy. So less than 30% of the budget is funding through the levy. And if we don't keep our fees going up, we're going to have to cut programs or look to other things. So it's really important that we review fees on a regular basis. And the 1.61 of net new construction that's all that we can add for non-debt or, for other activities. So we really are limited, and we'll have to be creative and look at operational efficiencies, look at fees and others as we look at trying to put together a budget for next year's. But we continue to encourage members of the board that have ideas. We're not saying don't bring in new ideas, but if you do, we need to figure out how we're going to pay for those early. Bring them forward and let us know what your concerns are early and often throughout the process. Again, we are in the first step of the development of the budget. The administrator is taking the comments from the committees and using that to develop his budget that he'll be presenting in September. We'll then, as the Human Resources Finance Property Committee, have a quick turnaround, look at it, make some potential minor modifications, and then send it out for publication, and then the public will have an opportunity to comment on the budget, and then ultimately the county board will adopt one in November. So we'll continue to adjust it based upon re-estimates. It seems like every year for the last few years, general transportation aids came in a little bit lower than what we projected them to be. But we have to be careful on cutting that because it carries over for 6 years. So that's not in this committee's purview, but not all dollars are the same. And if you have ideas, please bring them forth at this time.
If I can add one thing, Committee Chair Robinson sparked a thought, and we brought this up at infrastructure this morning. To the point about net new construction being the only thing we can add on the operating levy, absolutely true. On the debt levy side, I wanted to make clear, we've talked about, reserves are one-time money. It's like your birthday money, right? So you get to spend it once a year, and once you spend it, it's gone. The county board, in its last budget and of course last year, made some strategic decisions to utilize reserves for a couple of things. Most notably, apart from the budget last year, where the board allocated funds from reserves to decrease debt levy utilization, we made a loan to Bug Tussle, right? There was the initial conversation about should we do it through a conduit bond, because a couple of years before that, the county board had done a conduit bond with Bug Tussle for $25 million. Ultimately, there was a request for more funding, but instead of doing an $8 million conduit bond, we moved forward with an $8 million loan from the general fund. You'll recall that discussion at the time was when you encumber dollars within the general fund, it impacts the capital dollars that we have available to do capital projects. And this committee doesn't have a whole lot on the capital side, but nevertheless, I think it's instructive. Our policy has always been, right, when we get to the year, we have the audit, we audit the financials, and then in the year following the audit, those funds that are above our working capital designation, those can roll over and fund capital. And our conversation always has been, well, we're dipping into reserves, we're utilizing reserves, that's going to impact our capital rollover. Well, we just had the audit of the 2024 financials, and now for the 2026 budget, we have $0 for capital. So all those decisions are coming home. We're going to have to navigate that, and I met with Chris. Chris and I met along with Candace, and I should take this opportunity to introduce Candace. Candace Pesch is the new Deputy County Administrator. So she's making her way. This is her first week, so happy to have her. She was part of that meeting, and we will look through our capital needs. And just funding, Chris zeroed out everything other than the projects we absolutely need to do, things like rolling stock, replacing things that are breaking, and some critical IT projects on the security side. And then highway. As Chair Robinson said, if you don't fund highway projects in any 1 year, that decision follows you for 6 years. It decreases your general transportation aids for the next 6 years. So we funded those three things, everything else zeroed out. The cost of that, at least the first time Chris brought it back, was 4.7 million, but he's got it a little bit tighter now, 4.5 million. And again, we have $0 rolling in to CIP. So we've got a little bit of a task on the staff side about how to move forward with that. But it's certainly going to require more to go back onto, the board bought down the debt levy last year with reserves. It has to go back on. Or you're going to have 6 years of highway projects that are going to follow you. So we're going to have some choices, but some decisions to make. But we'll bring forward a plan to the board for considerations on the capital side and the program side, but not to be the Debbie Downer. This is the opportunity for all of you to, if you do have something, hey, we want to do this new area we want to get into. My challenge, of course, is then going to be, okay, what are we going to stop? Because we do have those other challenges.
Any discussion or questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So it was a couple months ago now, we had Synergy that came in, Angel Laidlaw as their director. They're the economic development organization for the 5-county region, including Marathon County, and talked about what they did. On Friday, I had the opportunity to sit in on a regional housing study that they had completed through North Central Regional Planning Commission. And what they're aiming to do is provide, really it comes down to incentives for missing middle single-family housing, as well as some other opportunities that they have. Just sitting on the call, it's interesting that, who's participating. It's the bigger municipalities. So within the 5-county region, it's the bigger municipalities that have the opportunity. We talked about last year, looked at the possibility of bringing somebody in from an EDO sense through extension based on their system limitations and limitations as educators. We didn't move forward with that, but I think it's the appropriate time to look at finding some type of ED person that works for Marathon County. Now, I think there's a number of opportunities, not only coordinating with economic development efforts within the county as a whole, but also providing assistance to our rural and smaller municipalities that don't have an ED person on staff. I think there's a lot of opportunities, including just missed opportunities through grants and things like that. The challenge, of course, is where do we get this from? I think we've talked about it in passing in the past. CPZ seems like the most logical home for such a person. So I don't know if reallocating resources from CPZ or looking at some of the money that we were going to provide UW Extension for that, taking some of those resources, but I don't know the ins and outs and where everything's at with CPZ, so I would look to the administration and departments to look at opportunities.
Sure, we can. Lori and I have already talked about their budget, and theirs is tight, just like every county department. I think we need to have a conversation here if this committee wants us to do that. And I actually have a meeting coming up with Patrick here in a minute to talk about, to your point, what can UW Extension offer in the space of economic development, so I can have that meeting and kind of bring back, we can talk about what that menu looks like and the kind of the services that UW Extension can offer in the economic development space and see if it checks enough of the boxes that you alluded to. The benefit of that, of course, is it's the state-county partnership with Extension. So if you get a good value, if enough of the things you want are in that list of available menu items. But the challenge there is, as you alluded to, is then you got to stop. It's a reallocation, because quite honestly, I don't have additional money to give. I shouldn't say the county doesn't have additional funds to move around to do that. So if there were something within really the departments that you have under this committee's purview, library is above operating levy. It's its own independent levy, so that can't be a source of funding. The UW, your obligation relative to the UW Marathon UW Marathon County Campus. Sorry, I'm channeling my inner committee chair Robinson. The UW Stevens Point Wausau campus is really one of maintenance dollars, which you still have to do that. McDevco is an allocation for economic development and entrepreneurial work that they do. And then when we talk about UW Extension, it's for the educators that you currently have. And your educator systems are an ag educator, a horticulture educator, and then you have 4-H. So, and then you fund some administrative support, but so it would be hard choices about what of those things you want to not have, or what, I should say, what is the most important?
Just follow up. Yeah, I think you make a lot of good points, and definitely within the UW extension, I wouldn't want to get into our ag or our 4-H. I think those are pretty pivotal programs, especially with the rural and agricultural nature of the county. It's just interesting in looking at, and I don't think, like we discussed a year ago, I just don't think having somebody from UW Extension doing the education would be, or the economic development would be the best fit. Work with a lot with Melinda Osterberg, who I think was the last person in that role in UW Extension, and there's just limitations in what they can do. Education is great, but we need somebody that can take their gloves off and get into the deep details of things, which is a limitation, unfortunately, for their programs.
So I have a question. We allocated money last budget to hire someone for economic development and divesting ourselves from properties, and we weren't able to find anyone. Is that the case?
No, I did find somebody to do part-time work, primarily doing the things you just talked about, getting RFPs ready. So I'll have an RFP ready to present to the HR, Finance, and Property Committee relative to the dormitory. So to recap, the conversation that was had here about divesting the dormitory was also had at the Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee, and their direction was to put together an RFP. So that individual is working on that. The other thing they've been assisting with, and this was called for in the adopted budget for that allocation of funding, was to help us address the tax deed backlog, and we have made very good progress on that. We're going to have an update at Human Resources, Finance, and Property next week, Wednesday, on our progress there. But again, those are one-time dollars that were spent on that. My plan is not to include that. I don't have the funds to include that in the budget moving forward, but my goal for that individual working on the RFPs is we will have draft RFPs ready for all of the primary properties that we would be that the county is going to be well positioned to divest. 1, the dormitory, 2, Thomas Street, and 3, the River Drive building. So those will all be ready. The goal is to have those all ready by the end of the year. So I think we'll make good progress on it, and my goal is hopefully just not to expend the full $157,000 that was allocated. So hopefully we do have some rollover into the 2027 budget. But those are not recurring dollars that were allocated.
And then another question, sorry, and then I'll get to you, Supervisor Lemmer. We, last meeting, asked regarding the dorms. I'm glad it's going out for RFP, but then we also requested finding out how much it would cost if we were to raise it. Were we able to get a number on that yet?
We did reach out to a firm that we consult and have consulted on previous demolition projects to get a high-level figure, and without them actually coming to the site, based on a square footage calculation and the materials and the location, because it's hemmed between the railroad and Garfield there, so there'd be some complications in terms of just the project on its own. They thought it would be upwards of close to $1 million at the end of the day per square, once you get the square footage, and then have to sort materials, dispose of them. That would probably go down a bit because we'd be able to utilize a landfill for some of that, but Again, that's high level. It could come down based on a number of different factors, but that's us kind of sharing the site, the square footage, 4 floors, and the materials are all concrete, brick, et cetera. So it's a larger project than the demolition of the cold storage facility we did on West Street. Yeah, sorry.
Oofda. That's all I can say. Go ahead.
Just to add on to that, so that anybody knows about the McClellan ramp in Wausau, last year was demo, and I think that came in between 700 and 800. So those prices seem standard for something that size.
Go ahead, Supervisor Lemmer.
So regarding economic development person, McDevco seems like a good place to look. Is it possible that we expand our contract or shift around something with them? We have a lot of economic development groups in the area. Maybe that would conflict, I don't know, but I feel like, I agree, I think we really should have a seat at the table, but I don't know how to make that happen creatively.
Certainly, I could have that conversation with Kim. I think it's important to know, again, we say economic development, but really, what are the things you want the individual to do? I think Supervisor or Vice Chair Pfeiffer brings up a good point, with, kind of on the spectrum of control is the way I'll look at it. When you have UW Extension, they have their kind of what their menu is that they are, or the things they're able to do, right? Based on their kind of that linkage, that vital linkage to education, because that is their wheelhouse, right? There are certain things that are outside of that box. On the far, so there's limited scope of control, because there are also, I should say not a limited, there's less scope of control that I would have over that position, because it's also a state employee, than a pure county-funded position that might live in conservation, planning, and zoning. In between those spectrums is where, or those ends of that spectrum, I would say is what you're talking about with McDevco, that, hey, we would contract for a service. I would say that's more on the end of, because we can always terminate a contract. There's a more direct piece there, but I have not had that conversation with Kim about either, one, their capacity to take that on, what that would look like, and two, she reports to a board, just like I do, where is it something they want to do? Their wheelhouse really has been primarily the operation of revolving loan funds for both the city of Wausau and for Marathon County. That's longstanding. And then your current contract with McDevco outside of revolving loan funds and outside of the POUTS revolving loan fund is for entrepreneurial development, which is their, I think it's the GEARS program is the name of that. So they do that, again, people interested in starting a new business, they come in and they go through a series of technical assistance programs that McDevco provides. Of course, they also have a contract with the city to operate the business incubator site out on 72nd. So we could do that. Again, the challenge is, my challenge to you would be, okay, we can expand a contract, but I've yet to find an entity that generally does that for no money. We would need to find, okay, what are the things you want to include in that contract? We'd have to make sure we also look at our procurement ordinance to see if that's consistent with our practices. But then, okay, in light of what you want for a scope of services, what is the cost? And it's my sense from what you provided, Vice Chair Pfeiffer, is that that's a considerable amount of work. It sounds like a full-time job. I know in other counties they do have, it's not overly common, but they do have, there are a number of counties that do have economic development professionals.
Anything else? Go ahead.
Yeah, just to respond to Supervisor Lemmer further, I think McDevco does a lot of great things, and I think they are a valuable part of what we have in Marathon County, but when I look at them, it's mostly on the financial, being able to provide the revolving loans. They do some work with entrepreneurship just based on the relationship with the business incubator, but in terms of their abilities having sponsors and getting private money as well, it kind of limits their ability to play a lot in the world where I'm thinking that they would be is working with municipalities and providing that technical assistance. It would be tough for them, and I agree with Administrator Leonard, if they were to take on additional, they would be looking for additional funds for it. I think, as Mr. Leonard said, is having somebody in the county gives us control of them and able to utilize them fully for what we're looking to do in more of a cooperative and technical assistance framework than getting involved in something where we have less control.
Anything else? Okay. Moving on to, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would just, for the sake of the committee, could you put this position as a placeholder? The HR Finance Committee will begin to look at both the KIP and new employee requests in the queue for us to consider as we look at the next year's budget. I know it's not formally before us, but if we could just have a placeholder for the continued discussion going forward.
Sure, I guess if that is the desire, I really would appreciate some additional direction on kind of what that position would look like.
I would
And-
think that we would need that by your September meeting.
My goal is to have all the new position requests that I have received and that I've culled that list down. My goal is to take that list to HR Finance at the end of August. That said, of course, if there's, my challenge to department heads for any new position is, okay, you want a new thing, what are you going to get rid of? That, it doesn't overcome the funding problem, because the net new construction that we have coming in is, again, 1.61. That's probably about $1 million. Your, even a 3% increase is well over $1 million. So I really do need direction. If you want a new thing, I'm going to have to move some resources around as I build the budget. And if it's an economic development position that is aimed at working with municipalities, I think I can pull that from, my thought is Barron County has a position that's somewhat similar. I can perhaps get that job description. But really knowing what you want to accomplish, I think would help me when I meet with Patrick also to figure out, are there, if 85 or 90% of the things that the county wants, the county board wants, are on the UW extension list, or on the UW extension menu, I can maybe reallocate resources to do the 15 to 20% that aren't on that list within my office or some other office. But really having a good set of, good idea as to what those deliverables would be for that position, I think would assist me.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to 2, consideration whether to direct administration to participate in Viewpoint Project Program, Discover America, Great Places to Live, Visit, and Start a Business. Administrator Leonard.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. So, as I said before, staff's job, I don't make decisions on where we spend our money. I spend it according to what you allocate. During the year, just a little bit ago, actually, I was contacted by a representative from the Viewpoint program, and you should have in your packet, it begins on page 68, an overview of what the Viewpoint program is, but they reached out and indicated they were interested in discussing putting together a program on Marathon County and how it's a great place to start and grow a business. So I gathered the information from them. Again, I don't make a judgment as to whether that's a necessarily a good thing or something that the county board should allocate funds to. In speaking with Chair Marash, the first thing I did was I then reached out to the CVB, the Visit Wausau folks, as well as the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce, to see if there was a desire on their behalf to perhaps partner, because I figured the county would, that would be an important consideration. Both the executive directors, the executive director of the CVB and the president CEO of the chamber, we're not overly interested in partnering. If I had to say what this program is similar to, I would say it's somewhat similar to the Uniquely Wisconsin work that the county board has approved previously, where a film crew comes in, highlights, in this instance, it would be a particular employer or business sector within the community based on the nature of this program. And of course, the county or whoever is paying for that would have to pay for it. The cost for this is approximately $30,000 was the cost within the proposal. My challenge, if I'm being very upfront with you, is, and one of the other reasons I reached out to the CVB and the chamber is timing on this. I don't have unending capacity in my department, and we're in the midst of budget and all trying to get through the work plan priorities that the board has identified. So if this is something that this committee is truly thinks is a priority, I would need to work to kind of reevaluate how we're going to do that and engage some staff. I was hoping that there would be strong interest in those other two parties that I referenced. There wasn't. So if we're going to move forward, I would see this needing to be a lift on from the county staff perspective. But beginning on page 75, they give you more of a description as to what the project would look like. And again, the funding is about, when you add in the initial development and underwriting and scheduling fee plus the travel, you're just about that $30,000 amount.
Discussion. Go ahead.
Looked at some of the links on this, and I guess I'm hesitant to move forward on this. I would say for our last discussion, I would take this $30,000 and put it towards the economic development position, frankly. I think that's a better investment of this money. Now, these programs come out, and they're cool, and you get some people that see Wausau, Wisconsin, Marathon County that wouldn't otherwise see that. Are they making decisions based on that? It's hard to say that there's any, correlating unless a business comes forward and said, we saw this, we moved forward. There's so much out there with site selection these days that people aren't watching a program that I don't even know, wasn't even aware of that was out there before I got the links on this, and they're seeing that and then choosing Marathon County because of it. So I'm hesitant.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Supervisor Limmer.
I agree. As much as I enjoy Dennis Quaid's work, I'd rather enjoy the work of a economic development person, too.
Supervisor Rosenberg.
I'd echo what was said, too. Nothing lit my fire with this.
Okay. Yes, Supervisor Unger?
Same.
You concur? I concur. We all agree. That's awesome. Okay. You don't have anything to worry about.
I will convey that information to.
Sigh of relief.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate the direction.
I just wanted to bring it forward to everyone so we could discuss it. So we did. Excellent. Moving on. B, discussion and possible action by EED to forward to County Board for consideration. 1, consideration for the board to direct staff to author a letter of support on behalf of the Board of Supervisors for the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership and Visit Wausau application for a destination marketing grant from the Wisconsin Department of Tourism relative to the gravel biking. So this will go to Lori. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I am not the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership. Bill Bertram had brought this to us, and he wanted to be here today, but he had something come up. So he had approached CPZ because he's been talking about this project through the Wausau Metropolitan Planning Organization as well, and we host the MPO. So he brought it to our department first, and I brought it to Administrator Leonard, and we felt it was most appropriate to bring it to Triple ED, and we are also bringing it to the Wausau MPO next week too for consideration. But this is what it has in the packet is the Wisconsin Gravel Roads Project. So it is an effort by this group to create a new experience within Marathon County related to gravel roads biking. And what they're pursuing through the grant application is funds to sort of market, brand, create signage for trailheads and signs on the routes. They're looking at building a 900-mile gravel road route throughout several counties, and as his summary explains, he has been working with our Parks Department and our Highways Department to help determine those routes throughout our county. I did confirm that. I did talk to Parks, I did talk to Highways. They have been in coordination with this group to identify those preferred routes throughout our county where they would agree to also install signage if they were able to get the funding to install the signage. One of the things Highways wanted to be clear and brought up is that they're agreeing to coordinate on installing the signage. If the signage needs to be replaced at some point in the future, that would be up to the partnership and not to Highways to replace that. So he just thought I should share that with you. So this, like I said, it's a new experience that they're trying to create within Wisconsin to also then hopefully bring more tourism to the area, create these sort of Iron Bowl events possibly in the future as well. Those are sort of those outdoor adventure races and things like that. So that's something they'd look at bringing to the county in the future as well. But I don't have much else I can offer at this point unless anyone else in the room is also familiar with the project, but that's what I can share, so.
Thank you.
Oh, and I did draft the letter in there for you to consider. So,
Okay, thank you. Anybody have comments or questions? Supervisor Rosenberg?
All they're asking is for us to author a letter? I mean, that's the extent of,
that is correct, yeah. So,
can I make the motion that we
Sure.
move ahead with authoring the letter?
We have a second by Vice Chair Pfeffrick. Any discussion? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say I've talked to Bill Bertram on this as well, and overall, I think this could be a very positive thing for our area. We talk about economic development, placemaking, things like that. People want to live in places where they have, if they enjoy gravel biking, this could be something that draws workers to our area, could draw businesses to our area. So I think this is a benefit. Thanks.
I just have one question, and probably you don't know the answer to it, but one thing that came to mind was being in rural areas with the gravel roads, has the Towns Association discussed this at all or given any opportunity to the residents that live on these roads? Because I grew up on a gravel road and have one named after me, and I would not be in favor of having all this extra traffic of bikes in my neighborhood when I moved out. You know, I lived out there for a reason. So I'm just curious if they've
I know
been informed.
the partners he listed on his brief, he has made contact with all of those partners. I know initially, I think they're just looking at creating the routes so that it's an opportunity for people to come. They're not talking about those events immediately, is my understanding, like the Iron Bowl events would be something that would come in the future. And I'm assuming if those were coming to the county, then we'd have to consider how we would manage those. And there'd be more coordination with the municipalities where that event would travel through, I believe. But I think initially it's kind of just an opportunity for people to come and have a weekend adventure. You know, it could be a group of 1 or 2 people, maybe a group of 10, you know, things like that.
If I could add on the marketing, I mean, we've done a little bit of history to Lori's point about county events. And you'll recall the county board did adopt an assemblies ordinance, and there was initially a lot of discussion about events just like this, that were things that would take place on roadways and what impacts does that have on county roadways. And it's important to remember and ground ourselves in the fact that this is a legal use of the roadway. Operating the bicycle, people don't need to, we cannot require an assemblies ordinance for people to go and travel a route. I think Mr. Bertram is looking at this more as, to Lori's point, a marketing campaign and a signage. Our ability to as a county, if we're asked to provide services relative to that event is a different story, right? If our highway department is asked to set out signage, or the sheriff's office is asked to do traffic control at an intersection and we're going to shut down an intersection, or to Lori's point, if it goes through a municipality and they want to do, there's a request for them to do that. There are those interplays with government, but you know, I think Mr. Bertram is looking at this similar to how the Great Pinery Waterway Trail that he was able to work through, working with our park department and the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership and others, really to create that, further the narrative that the Visitors Bureau, Visit Wausau, has worked on, which is base camp. Marathon County is the base camp for outdoor recreation. So to Supervisor Rosenberg's point, the only thing they are asking for right now is the letter, and it is in your packet on page 80, drafted to come from Board Chair Gibbs, so it is agendized for you to send it to the full board for consideration, so that it would come from the full board.
Go ahead, Supervisor Larmer.
Yeah, I fully support this too. I will be probably for the rest of my life a 1,000-miler want-to-be, because I do segments of the Ice Age Trail, but probably will never get that done, even though I continue to hike, and now I'm on to lots of different other counties, and we wind up going to restaurants and other things in those communities. So I think this is an easy way to get people to come and segment bike and then stop at one of our fun spots.
All right, anyone else? We have a motion and a second. No further discussion. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Passes unanimously. Excellent. On to the next. Number 6, educational presentations and committee discussion. We have McDevco's report in the packet. And then we go on to B, UW Extension monthly report, including but not limited to the following. 1, recognition of Heather Schlesser by National Association of County Agricultural Agents. And then I'm just going to tee up 2, since you'll be speaking on both, the update on FoodWise and Extension's programming in local counties. So Patrick, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to start off with one thing Extension does really bad. And that's, we do not promote ourselves very much. We don't pat ourselves on the back very much. We don't really say, this is what we do. We like to operate behind the scenes as educators. So interestingly enough, when Madam Chair brought this to me, I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea. And as her supervisor, I'm like, I feel horrible. So I went into Heather and I said, so can you tell me about this award? She's like, where'd you hear about this? Through my committee chair. Why? Well, I'm kind of a private person. I don't tell many people. I said, yep, it's not surprising to me. That's a typical Extension staff member. They like to do the work, not be recognized. But that being said, the Distinguished Service Award is rare. So every state gets one nominee, and this is actually the National Association of Ag Educators. In Wisconsin, every county wants an ag educator. I think we said it earlier, like, you know, ag is very important, especially in rural counties, which of course most Wisconsin. But most counties have several ag educators. In Marathon, we actually have 2. We have crops and soils, and then we have dairy, which of course is what Heather does. So of the hundreds of ag educators in Wisconsin, Heather was recognized, which I think speaks very highly to the work she does here specifically in Marathon County. Now, Distinguished Service Award, you have to be in a co-op. They say a co-op extension employee, because that's like the old school term of extension staff. You had to be now it's UW extension staff employee for at least 10 years. You have to have work done in the local community. And there's many other assets, like facets of what this award goes into. Now, a little bit about Heather. So Heather, actually, I mentioned earlier, is our dairy educator, specifically targeting actually artificial insemination in breeding cattle. So Heather is also a professor at UW, faculty. She has been a distinguished member and colleague of our staff for 12 plus years. I mentioned, so she's actually, you know, when I said faculty, so she's not a typical like colleague. She's an educator, yes, but 60% of her role is actually facilitating research that hits a lot of larger organizations that we typically don't work with. Educators, we usually are like those, beginning entrepreneurs or people who are learning to, just start some things. But, for her, as a great example, just to our north here, Vandergeest, very large organization. That's someone who would look to Heather for research on their breeding stock to grow their group. Wysocki's, I can name many very large organizations that look to UW Extension to do that work. But specifically, the research work that's done within it's called CALS, College of Ag and Life Science. So Heather was recognized. I can be careful of what I say more about it, but she's very happy. And I said, do you mind? And she said, no. It's just, she's very common, doesn't like to show recognition for the work she does. So, and thank you, Madam Chair, for saying, can we show a picture of her? Rather not. I know it's a surprising thing, like, really? But that's Heather. But if you see her, I'd say in person, it would be definitely appropriate to say, thank you for all the work you do. She would appreciate that. So.
Thank you for that, and it was just brought to me by another supervisor, and I did want to recognize her because it's a big deal, so
It's a
thank
huge
you.
deal. Yeah, like I said, I felt horrible, like, oh my God. And she said what she asked, because the state usually puts out, public service announcements, they put out things in email. I looked back, I Googled it, I looked in my everything, I'd look in my file, I'm like, what did I miss? I didn't miss anything, but nonetheless, it's cool to see. So like I said, only one in Wisconsin, pretty cool. So the next unfortunate item I have, and we've gone into a little bit of this in the last couple meetings, FoodWise, which is the SNAP Ed education for Wisconsin. SNAP Ed is the education that goes into schools that are kind of 50% in free reduced lunch, but also do things with farmers markets. They do things with food banks. That's FoodWise. FoodWise is housed under the Health and Wellbeing Institute, which is one of 6 institutes within UW Extension. As I'm sure you've heard from me and you've seen in the media, 95 UW Extension staff were actually provided their layoff notice last week, Wednesday. So, we've talked about, the program was ended, the funding was eliminated, but now it's kind of like that, I call it the timeline. Like, now we're at the end of that where everyone received the notice. UW's working hard to try to provide a landing pad so they can get several months off with pay, get paid their vacation, everything we're trying to do to make sure, because it's a large problem. It's not just Wisconsin. This is happening nationwide, but this is happening specifically here in Marathon County. It's affecting 3 staff. Staff that actually works in schools, staff that does policy, which policy grows nutrition. As a great example, what this colleague would do is she'd go into school and ask, why aren't kids eating lunch? Why aren't kids eating breakfast? Why aren't kids, doing these things? Sometimes it's what it looks like. Sometimes it's not as cool to the signage on it. So she would work on making it just more, cooler to eat breakfast, which helps kids be happier. I was just at what they call a national night out last night. And someone from the Boys and Girls Club said, hey, who is it that goes into schools and teaches kids how to eat? It's FoodWise. And that's what it is. So the loss of FoodWise is the ripples go, you can't even see it yet. But specifically, what's in here, so our Dean Carl Martin he sent a letter, said, please share this with your partners. It's kind of like, yes, this is happening. Layoffs within UW Extension, UW is unheard of. So this is why it's quaking to us. But that's what, I think it's the last page of the packet, just so you can see, and he's available, he's our dean, so he represents all of Extension, which we are one of the largest organizations for UW. So we're a lot of staff, and this falls under health and well-being, which 120 total impacted staff, 95 layoffs. The remainder of those that are not laid off are mainly in the Milwaukee area, which is just a little bit, there's other funding that augments that time of it. So, ultimately it's kind of I mean, hopefully not the last bad news I delivered to the committee about what's happening with FoodWise. Now, there's a lot of things happening. I know Wisconsin County Associations, they're lobbying. There's legislation on Robin Voss's desk. There's a lot of things hoping to try to reestablish funding for that program. As a matter of fact, Portage County just last month did a resolution to send to area representatives saying, hey, how can we reestablish funding for this? This was a free program for counties, ultimately. Federally funded, that had staff in every county, 71 of 72 counties, to bring nutrition education to the ground up model. You know, it's so cool to hear, and even my kid, you know, goes to Adams Friendship School District. And I remember her coming home like, Dad, what's a golden kiwi? I'm like, you know, a yellow kiwi? And then I'm Googling it like, what the hell is a golden kiwi? But of course, first time we go to the store, what does she ask for? Golden kiwi. And it is the ground up model of nutrition. And as you travel throughout central Wisconsin, we're a food desert. Most of central Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin, food desert, meaning 1 or 2 grocery stores and a lot of Dollar Generals. So the work that's being done now is, the question I'll ask is, who's going to do it? Extension, we could go back and say, is another institute staff member, colleague able to do this? The answer is no. That we all have specialties. There's no duplication. There's no other agency doing work like this. There's WIC, which provides more infant care, but there's now a loss of nutrition education within the United States, you know, specifically Marathon County. So that's what I have, Madam Chair.
All
And
right.
I can take any questions.
Okay, any questions? Go ahead, Supervisor Lemmer.
I don't really have any questions. I just have a soliloquy. You know, this is such a loss, this SNAP-Ed. It is one of the programs that is preventative for childhood obesity. It gets teachers coaches into preschools and Head Starts to introduce kids to vegetables and fruits that they haven't seen, as you understand, the kitchen and cooking, movement and other physical activities, so it decreases screen time. Fit Families and the Hunger Coalition used SNAP-Ed. That's a huge loss. It's going to be a hole. They also packed our stock boxes for senior food, and I'm not sure how those holes are going to be filled yet, but I will tell you, there's a big movement on reducing waste, fraud, and abuse. Well, SNAP-Ed doesn't fit any of those categories. There's also a big push on Make America Healthy Again. I think we all agree we want that. So this morning, I fired off a couple of letters because I think it's important that our representatives know that we care about these, and they do fit our mission. So I encourage the rest of you to fire off a letter and advocate if you care about these programs. And I think childhood obesity, something we should all get behind and try and advocate for. So,
Anyone else? All right. So with that, we move on to 7, next meeting date and time, announcements, and future agenda items. A, committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. And B, next meeting, Thursday, September 14th at 3 p.m. How can it be September already? What was it? That can't be.
It should be the 4th.
The 4th, sorry. That's what, I just read it off the paper. So September 4th. Yeah. They look like them, too. All right, so then I'll take a motion for adjournment. Motion by Rosenberg, second by Lemmer. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Huh. All right, have a good day.
County committee meetings today have been excellent. It's been 1 hour exactly, almost. Those are the perfect